Hello and welcome back to another episode of All Elite Arcade. I am your guest host, not your guest host, your co-host. There is no guest this week. It's Evil Uno with my main man, my good friend, the Chugs. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Also, the co-host of the All Elite Arcade.
That's right.
Very excited. This is episode 24 for us, Uno.
I can't believe
I'm so excited.
That's half of the year. We're almost halfway through the year. It's
unbelievable.
Yeah, and
unbelievable.
time flies, and games never stop.
Time flies when you're playing video games.
It's true.
That's the quote of the day.
I played a lot of video games this week. Usually, sometimes we complain about like the travel. We've both been like living in different situations right now.
Yep.
Not this week though. I will say I made a huge point to put in multiple hours in some video games, and I know on your end too. Like this might be the most loaded week of video games for us as far as like how many hours we've played.
I think so too, because I know for me, I put an extensive amount of time into 5 games, and not only because I love playing video games, but I thought it'd be great for All Elite Arcade this week to be able to talk about all the different games that I'm playing. Like, so for example, I had my streaming game, my Xbox game, my PlayStation game, my Switch game, and my Steam Deck, aka PC game that I played. So I went through 5 games, didn't beat them all, but definitely put a lot of time in.
Yeah, you hit everything. You hit everything.
I tried.
The only thing you needed was like a VR game, which neither of us have played this week, but
no,
we're doing good. We're doing good.
We are. So once again, for everyone who listens weekly, I am still continuing to play through Black Myth Wukong. I am definitely over halfway. I play these games incredibly slow, mainly because I really do try to find everything. This game and its secrets, I know I've mentioned before, but they're so fascinating. The bosses are so cool that I really seriously, Uno, am taking my time and looking at every single corner of the map and trying to get every single item. I'm sure still I'm going to miss stuff, but as the game has continued on, it's continuing to get more and more challenging. And slight spoilers for everyone listening for Black Myth Wukong, but Chapter 4, there is a lot of spiders. And it really, really creeps me out. I do not like spiders at all. But the area is so cool. Again, I know I hate to sound like a broken record, but I really mean this. Is just the level design is so excellent. Like the verticality of these stages and all the different easy to miss secrets that you could find, or great items and great spirits and really, really tough optional bosses. It's been so much fun. So much fun.
What about so Chapter 4 now, you were talking about how large Chapter 3 was in size. Does 4 seem comparable? Does it seem larger or?
So I'm still kind of, I think, in the beginning phases of Chapter 4, or at least it feels that way. So depending on how much longer Chapter 4 goes, it absolutely could be. But I know Chapter 1, still plenty of content, but fairly short. Chapter 2 was like double in size. Chapter 3 felt like a whole game.
Yeah.
It was huge. So Chapter 4, like I said, I'm only the first few hours into Chapter 4, so I'm not sure how large it's actually going to be. But the story, the juicy lore is continuing to get better and better and better. And like I said, the more stuff that you unlock, the new staffs, new armor, new spells, new spirits, new mini bosses, it's been an absolute blast. So just more of the same with me when it comes to Black Myth Wukong. And I can't wait. Again, if I were to pick a top 3 video games this year for me, it would be Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Black Myth Wukong, which I am streaming, and then another game that I put some more time into, and that being Astro Bot on the PlayStation. Again, this game is continuing to prove to me that it's maybe the best 3D platformer that I've ever played. I know I've been saying that for a while, but I really mean that. I remember when you talked about how much you enjoyed it. I was unbelievably excited. And Astro Bot continues to just absolutely blow me away. Again, at this point, I'm about to start the 4th world within Astro Bot, but I'm also trying to 100% everything in Astro Bot. But I think before I jump to the 4th world, I think I'm going to go and do the optional hidden world for a little bit and check that out. So again, when we talk about this being a love letter to Sony, it really, really is. I won't say the characters, but there are multiple levels with characters that were very, very, very important to Sony, and they get so properly showcased with Astro Bot. Again, in every level, there's like a new mechanic. I'm waiting for them to like repeat mechanics. They're all new. They're all different. It is just God, it is so good. It is so fun to play.
So I've actually put in, I 100%ed it this week.
Oh, nice.
That was my, as far as my main game this week, Astro Bot was it. I've been waiting for months. We've talked about it before, about its release. And now I'm like, I'd say maybe like 3 trophies away from platinuming it on PlayStation. And the same opinion. It might be the very best mascot 3D platformer ever made. It's also like, I don't know if we talked about this, like we talked about the sound design and we've talked about the controller rumble and the haptic feedback, but visually it's incredible. Like oftentimes I'll just look in the background and they've got like 70 birds just flocking around. There's so many like particles that fly around. You're moving through grass and the grass just splits apart on you. The minute details they have in it is insane when you consider that they made so many levels with so many mechanics and like every like interaction you have has an audio cue, has a vibration cue, has a haptic feedback on it. It's incredible. And then on top of that, they have their animation department must have worked overtime because Astro Bot, at some point, small spoiler, Astro Bot, you can wear different outfits, and then those outfits have their own different animations. So as you're wearing that outfit, if you don't touch the controller for 15 seconds, he does an animation. If you don't do it for a minute, he does a different animation. Every outfit has its own. Every character you interact with, there's so many Sony characters to the point that there's some that I don't even know who they are. I actually had to look up a lore video, or not lore video, but like a video of every single character they show and what game they're from. But every one of them has their own animation. It has a secondary animation, and there are 160, if I remember correctly, characters spread out through the game. And then on top of that, I kept seeing these like little secret videos of stuff that I haven't even seen. So it's, I don't want to keep saying what our top 3 games of the year is because that's like stealing away our content for the end of the year. But
yeah, sure.
It will be there. There's no, I can almost guarantee this is in my top 3, if not the number 1 spot will be Astro Bot. It is like, I finished it and I instantly, much like the little demo, felt sad. Because I knew, I was like, it's going to be years before I feel a game make me so happy again. Everything is great about it.
It really is. And you know what else is interesting? And this, maybe this is a little controversial, but obviously I think most people would say Mario is king.
Yes.
When it comes to the 3D platformer. And no one is taking that away. Mario for years has just been, from Mario 64 all the way up to Mario Odyssey. Mm-hmm. Like, Mario has dominated 3D platformers. I mean this. Astro Bot is knocking at the door. It really, really is.
I would think Odyssey was the best 3D platformer before this, and this might be better on a couple. They are different games, but this one,
very different.
If you have never played one of these games, there is no penalty to dying. Like if you die, you come back literally a few steps before, excluding the big challenge runs. There's wide amounts of variety. You are rewarded constantly if you go the extra mile and pick up everything. The boss, actually, one thing I want to talk about too. The boss battles are so smartly designed in ways that they use mechanics that you've used before, but then like as you're doing them, you're like, I can't believe these are the extra interactions I'm having with these like giant boxes.
The boss fights are so good.
They're so good. They're so good, and there's like there's a large amount of them too, because some regular worlds you think end at the end, but they just feed into a big boss battle. So like on top of what is obviously like the way it's structured will have end with a big boss battle, a lot of the levels are also boss battles as well. So there's like 15 boss battles across this game, and they're all very, very good.
Yeah, really, really good. And I agree with you. But before Astro Bot, Mario Odyssey was my favorite 3D platformer. So I'm very excited to see what Mario does next. But also, a game that I jumped into on my Switch was Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Because I still have not finished that game. And again, so awesome. Such a great, like, traditional 2D Mario. I'm still going through World 3. So I'm actually fairly early on, but same thing. I'm trying to get as many Wonder Seeds as I possibly can.
Yep.
And same thing. I know this is pretty much known, and this game's been out for a while, but I'm so blown away by every single Wonder Seed that you collect, or every scenario where you kind of change the level, how different all those levels are. It's so cool. It's so accessible, too. There's so many different characters that you can play as. The badge concept is really, really cool, and I do know that towards the end, there's some secret levels that are very, very difficult. But again, Super Mario Bros. Wonder is a game that I jump back into that I definitely want to finish. That's my priority on my Switch right now. So very, very good game.
Those special levels you're talking about are unreal. Like, Mario's known for having challenging levels. I remember playing through Wonder. I beat that game and I 100%ed it. The special levels will take hours, and there aren't that many of them. It's just they're so difficult to beat.
Oh, wow.
So I'm excited to see, because you love a challenge, so I'm excited to see what you get out of it.
I do. I'm excited to play through and beat all the optional levels, or eventually, hopefully, beat the game if I can. But I did finally beat a game this week as well.
Ooh, okay.
And that game was Senua's Saga Hellblade II, which I talked about this a little bit previously, about having started it, and finally I was like, man, I really got to finish this game. It's been way too long. I have to just finish it and continue it. And again, the sound design in this game is so incredibly next level. Absolutely. For this game, you want to have a headset on because you're hearing voices in either ear. Graphically, it's beautiful. It's one of the prettiest games that I've ever played. And again, this game feels... It's very much a cinematic experience. There's not a ton of gameplay mechanics. There is fighting, there is battles, there is puzzles, and walking and talking. So it's not like there's a ton of things to really do as far as mechanics and combat-wise. But the way that they do it is so excellent. Like the fighting that you're in, with the way that she's yelling and how heavy the attacks feel, it really feels like a real fight, which to me makes it very compelling. It also has dynamic difficulty, where if you're getting absolutely destroyed, then maybe you'll start getting a few shots in. Or if you're really crushing the enemies, then they get even faster. So the game adapts to the way that you're playing to give you the most authentic, like, challenging experience for you. Like I said, there's also a bunch of collectibles that you can get as well with extra juicy lore, which I love so much. But I did finish the game, and it made me cry.
Really?
Tears were definitely coming down my face. But it was a beautiful game. It's a heavy game, but it was beautifully done and just such a powerful story. So to me, if anyone listening wants to experience a really cool, really powerful story, Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 is definitely should be on your list.
Yeah, it's got an insane... the subject matter is pretty crazy, all things considered. And it's won multiple awards based solely on its sound design, and about how realistic it addresses its topic matter. I don't want to get too into it because part of the surprise is being present for when it starts happening.
Exactly.
I still haven't put more time into it, but I might have to because it's also fairly short, right? It's under 10 hours.
Yeah, definitely under 10 hours. And definitely worth an experience, man. It's a story that's going to stick with me for a while. And not to bring it back to Astro Bot, but if Astro Bot has absolutely perfected the haptic feedback within gaming, Hellblade 2 has perfected the sound design. It is wild, but really, really good. And then finally, Uno, I played one more game, a game that I've been meaning to try for a really, really long time, and I finally jumped into it this week. This was thanks to a recommendation from a member of the Chugs Army, actually. And this game was Nine Souls on the Steam Deck. So, and I had heard you had talked about it, other friends of mine had talked about it, and I finally was like, okay, I got to jump into this game because I love a good Metroidvania. And I can't believe, we said this off podcast before we got started. I feel like it's changing, and I feel like more people are talking about it now, but I can't believe more people are not talking about this game.
I'm surprised, like neither of us... So I got this recommendation maybe once or twice, but almost always a Metroidvania comes out, and I'll get 50 recommendations because people know it's my thing. Nine Souls is and I might be the most Chugs and Uno game to come out in the last year, and somehow only one or two people have told me about it. I've played about an hour and a half. I'm not very deep into it, but like within that first hour, I was like, this lore is incredible. This opening story is insane. I believe the art style is hand drawn, which like it looks so nice. And like I don't even know, because I'm only an hour and a half in. It's very difficult. Me too. It's
very difficult,
super challenging. To the point that I'm like, okay, this might be why people didn't know, because a lot of people might just bounce early. But now in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm so driven to trying to see more of this, because and I don't want to say it's like Hollow Knight, but this game feels like Hollow Knight more so than any other Metroidvania I've played before. And so I'm very excited to see further in. How far into it are you now?
I'm about the same, Uno. I'm about maybe an hour and a half tops, to be honest. But same thing is when you brought up Hollow Knight. Again, they're very different games, but it has that same. It has the same feel of like this pristine, super well made, very smooth Metroidvania. And also, again, if you are a story person within video games, after the first 30 minutes of this game, you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm in. Like the intro is just so unbelievable. But again, similar to it being a great Metroidvania, it also, with a parry system, kind of reminds me of Sekiro as well, with having to perfect parry. And I remember the first 5 minutes, the first enemy I encountered, I would go and fight that enemy. And if I got hit, then I would go back and rest, because I was like trying to perfect the parry system. And then even like the first boss that I encountered, I lost the first time. So I'm like, okay, the game is forcing you to get good with parries, similar to Sekiro in that sense. But it's awesome. You can just tell it's going to be a massive experience, and you can tell the story is going to be so good. So good.
We were talking about this off screen, but like we're not super deep into it, so we can't give our full recommendation yet. But I would not be surprised if this is a sleeper hit at the end of the year. There's been a lot of big games, but if everyone's dropping a top 10, I bet you this game is showcased a fair amount by the people who have played it, because
you're right.
If it keeps on an hour and a half in, if it can keep the same amount of or level of quality that the first 90 minutes has had for the entire duration, this will be one of the best Metroidvania games I've played in a long time, for sure.
Easily.
And you're playing that on Steam Deck right now, correct?
I am playing it on Steam Deck. I have the Steam Deck OLED, so it looks absolutely beautiful. I know that for some recommendations, same thing, when you start, it says it's recommended to play with a controller and with headphones. And headphones, the music and everything just sounds so good. But playing it on the Steam Deck, it has worked great, ran great, no issues at all. No, I mainly wanted to get this on the Steam Deck because I know while we're traveling, I'm gonna want to play this game.
Oh yeah. It seems like the perfect amount. Like you can put in 2 hours and feel like a gradual process. So talking about Steam, most of my gaming was done on Steam this week as well. Still not on Steam Deck. I still have not gotten the OLED. But I've been playing off this laptop. I've been very fortunate. It runs most of the games that I've been playing. This week, a couple indies that I've been waiting for have dropped. The first one was Plucky Squire. That is it's a very hard one to explain, but essentially it's a picture book where you see physically the picture book in 3D, but the inside the picture book is in 2D. And so you do like over-the-top Zelda-like 2D puzzles and combat with your sword. But at some point, not that this is a spoiler, this is how it's been showcased in all the trailers, but at some point you get kicked out of the book and you become a 3D entity outside of the book. And so you have to interact with things outside the book, solve puzzles, fight enemies, get items, bring those items back into the book, manipulate items within the book. So it's been very cool. It's got a lot of cool, interesting puzzle mechanics. Going the 2D to 3D, that's a very interesting puzzle mechanic. But it also has like a a text-based mechanic where there are scriptures inside of the book, as if like written on a 2D page. And if you attack it, you can knock some of the words and switch those words with other words and essentially create new items within the game. So, for example,
that's cool.
A simple form would be like, it says like the bridge was broken, while you can interact, and then the bridge is tiny, or the brick is huge, or it's solid, or it's underwater. Like you can play with those with those and essentially manipulate your environment as you progress forward. I'm about, I'd say, 5 hours into it. It's been very cute. Art style makes me think of Dogman and a lot of like those like comics made to movies art form. It definitely knows its subject matter. And I'm kind of curious to see where they keep going with it, because there's a few times where I've interacted with things and it's gone in directions I didn't anticipate, new mechanics I didn't anticipate. So I'm willing to, I'll probably end up finishing this game just to see what else they get out of this, because the 2D to 3D is a super interesting mechanic. We've seen it before, but at some point it gets old, and it hasn't yet. And I'm just hoping they can keep throwing in some few little twists to keep me for the full journey. But it's been very good. I highly recommend it. If you're on, it's on Steam, but it's also on PS Plus this month. If you have PS Plus Premium,
I do
get it.
I
get
do.
it. It's well worth playing. It's well worth playing.
Yeah, nice.
And then another huge indie game that I've been waiting months for is. This one is from Mossmouth. It's the person who made Spelunky. They arranged a bunch of indie developers to make one game called UFO 50.
I can't wait to hear about this, Uno.
Yeah,
so very excited to hear about this.
It's a game that they've been talking about for years, and essentially what it is back in the NES days, and I own this game, they used to make like compilation games, including Action 52, where they'd make 52 games, and each game was its own standalone game. So they've made this on an independent level called UFO 50. It's 50 games. I've only, so I can be frank, I can't make a full recommendation of everything. I've only played 15 of those games. But out of the 15, I'd say 11 were so polished they could be their own standalone little indie games. And 4 of them I just haven't understood the concepts and need to go back to. And so it's presented like a one standalone game. You log in, you get access to all 50 games, and what's really neat is it's from like a fake console that is supposed to be like the NES. And the way it's done is you can play them chronologically, or you can jump into any one after the other. But if you play them chronologically, it starts from like 86 to 92. And as you play them, you can see the bits. You can see the way the games are developed. You can see the depth of the games evolve.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I'm only midway through, and like I haven't hit 92, but like 92 Nintendo is like Mario 3 and Mario and so on. So I'm very interested to see what those late games are. But great music, very NES-like. Some of the music is not great, but it's also because it's earlier Nintendo where it's like repeated MIDI sounds over and over, which is very interesting. And then a lot of these games just have way more depth than you would anticipate. I've been playing one that's like a tactics game. I've been playing one that's a puzzle game. And I've played... Of the 15, there's 2 of the games I've already put 3 hours into each. So if that blows up to each game being that good, I could see myself playing this until the end of the year. Reviews for it have been incredible. The people that have played through everything are speaking so highly of it.
Uno,
please go.
Sorry, very quickly. So to be clear, even from the 15 games that you have played, like they're different genres of games too. It's not like they're all the same. They're all different types of games, which is such a cool idea.
In the 15, like for example, there was an over-the-top shooter game. There was a platformer game. There was a dungeon crawler game, a tactics game, a few puzzle games, but the puzzle mechanics were vastly different. There's like a volleyball game, but you're ninjas, so you have like ninja power. So it kind of plays like Windjammers a little bit. You know how Windjammers you had attacks to volley the disc back and forth. It's the same, but with ninjas. There's been like in the 15, there might be a few that were the same type of game, but they're so dramatically different in the puzzle genre that they do not feel the same at all. And I'm so curious to see what the rest of it. So in the next few weeks in All Elite Arcade, it's almost guaranteed I'm going to give you updates of this because I am pretty certain I will play all 50 of them. And then on top of that, all of them have their own achievement. So if you beat the game, you get one achievement. And there's a secondary achievement if you do specific things in the game. It gives you a gift. And on your menu, you can flip to a page that's essentially a habitat. And that habitat gets filled with more and more content for your little character to interact with as you beat these games. So I almost feel like there's going to be somewhat of an extra component to the game that I haven't still found because I'm not deep into it yet. And so I'm very, very curious to see what the future lies on this because if my current experience is I've already played 10 hours of it, I can see myself put 100 hours into this game because there's so much variety. And so I highly recommend it. And from my understanding, it does play on Steam Deck. And it is on Steam right now. No other console, from what I understand, but well worth it. And it is playable on the controller as well. I have a Super NES USB controller that I've been playing with it. It makes it feel even more authentic. Very, very enjoyable. Highly recommend it from Evil Uno for sure.
That's going to my wish list immediately. Uno.
Yes.
Immediately.
Yeah, I think you would like it for sure. That's all the games I've been playing this week. What about you, Chugs? Was that it as well?
That was it. Those were the 5 games. The 5 games I went over. That was about it.
Cycle. Well, guess what? That's it for the video games we played this week. But that's not it for the news because there's a huge amount of news that came out in this week's week of news in video games, and we will talk about that right after this. And we're back with the news of the week. It's been a huge week of news, actually. Surprisingly, a lot of stuff has come out, and it starts off with a pretty big one for me personally, but also a pretty big one for one of our friends. There's been a Like a Dragon event that was dropped just recently, actually in the last day. And if you have not played Like a Dragon, that's the Yakuza games, Like a Dragon being the new name of the new series, but most of it based in Hawaii. Well, there's a new Like a Dragon game that is coming out. It was announced at the RPG Summit, and it is a game where you play as Goro Majima. If you played the Yakuza games, he's a villain of an early Yakuza game that is so beloved that he kept reappearing because he's so crazy, and he became almost a character that people identify from Yakuza. Well, he is coming back. You get to play as Goro Majima, and in this game, it's pirate-based, which Yakuza does weird stuff where like they've done turn-based RPGs. I believe this one will be as well. They've done action RPGs. They made Animal Crossing games inside of stuff. They're known for all their mini games. This one is pirate-based, includes pirate ships, and has like an almost Assassin's Creed Black Flag looking element to it.
Very nice.
Obviously, we've seen only a few little bits of information on it, but the trailer revealed that Majima is washed up on this island in Hawaii, and he is then. It takes 6 months later, so it's 6 months into the story. He's already implemented into the place, and it looks like it will directly feed off the previous game, which was Infinite Wealth, with repercussions from what the previous character did, and all of that super exciting. But it comes out February 28th, 2025, so still very, very soon. But the most exciting of all is that, and this was a complete reveal to us too, he never let it on. Samoa Joe is in this game.
Yes.
And he's not like just like a throwaway character. I believe he is one of the main villains potentially in this video game. Really cool because Samoa Joe's been doing these crazy side stories in video games. He's been in he's been the voice of King Shark. He's been in this. He's been part of the Twisted Metal universe, and then he's probably done a ton of voices for other video games we're completely unaware of. super excited for him because Yakuza is one of my favorite series, and super excited for a new Yakuza game to come out this February. I cannot wait to play this game.
Yeah, this is so awesome. Such a great announcement. Samoa Joe's great. And I'll tell you, I still, to this day, I've been meaning to jump into the Yakuza series forever. Mm-hmm. I have Yakuza 0 on my Xbox Series X because I was told maybe that's a good place to start.
That's the perfect starting point for sure.
Okay. But now with Samoa Joe in this, I got to check this out. This may be my tipping point for me to finally jump into Yakuza.
Well, here's the thing. Yakuza games can be like 100 hours long. And so if you want to get into it, if you really want to go all the way, I'd say you start at Yakuza 0 because then you can play 1 to 7 afterwards. But if you just want to get into the current story stuff, you can play the first Like a Dragon. That's about Ichiban's story. And you can not know anything from the first 7 and you won't be completely affected by it. And because Like a Dragon, then Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, and then this one, they all pair up together. And so if you really want to play the Samoa Joe game, you can play the 2 previous games, but those will run you 100 hours each. They're big games.
I've heard they are massive games, but I heard they're incredible games.
Yes,
and I have no issue playing a super long game.
Yes, very good. Just to be frank, I've put 100 hours into both of those as well. Very good. Well worth it. Super weird, super zany, and this game looks like it will be no different.
Everyone, let me know down in the comments. Should I jump into the Yakuza series?
Yes, and which one should he start? Which should he start with?
Where should I start? Let me know.
My first one was Yakuza 0, to give you an idea, perfect. And then I jumped around from there.
Okay.
Other big news from this week, so on top of the RPG Summit announcing the Yakuza game, we also had a big EA Investors event where they kind of let on at some of their next upcoming games. They talked about The Sims. The Sims, everyone's had this rumor that Sims 5 is going to come out. Well, they've actually confirmed that they are not actively planning to make a Sims 5 game, saying that Sims 4 is so complete and they will just keep expanding upon it, which is good because I have in the past have spent thousands of dollars on The Sims 4. To start from fresh would just continue on. It would just end up spending even more money. It's already a 10-year-old game, which is insane. But that is not all. It also seems like The Sims are making a movie. It is currently in the works. This will be produced by Lucky Chap, the people that were behind Barbie, which was a huge one, as well as is directed by the Loki Season 1 director, Kate Herron, and it will feature Margot Robbie, which was, if you did not know, was from the movie Barbie, and is a huge star, so this will do, I think as far as video game movie adaptations, a lot of people may not think about this one as being a big one. I bet you this one does bonker numbers because it's such a casual game in a way that everyone has put their hands on it. Everyone's aware of it, but no one ever talks about it.
Yep. I completely agree, Uno. This movie, I'd be willing to bet, is going to crush.
I mean,
aside from the fact that, like you said, The Sims is one of those games where even if someone's not a gamer, a lot of people have played The Sims. Yeah. And a star like Margot Robbie being the lead, what else could you ask for?
Like, my mom still actively plays that stuff, and she doesn't even touch console games. She's still playing The Sims. I think she's still playing Sims 1. So that gives you an idea. Like, people love this franchise, and it seems like they built a great team. As far as, like, Barbie was an incredible movie, so to have that production house and on top of that have a good director and a good lead, it looks like it is heading in the right direction.
For sure.
Other EA news, they have said that the Star Wars Jedi series will continue. The third game is in active development, but it will be the end of the series. You and I have both talked about this, but the next entry in the Respawn and Lucasfilm video games, that series is great. I love it, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely unbelievable. I really do mean this, and there have been a lot of great Star Wars games, but for what I like in games, the Star Wars Jedi series is my favorite Star Wars franchise ever.
Yes.
It really, really is. I loved it. Fallen Order was incredible. Survivor was incredible. Yeah. So I'm so excited to see the third one in the trilogy. It's going to be so good.
It plays right into the type of combat we like. It features, I mean, I've come accustomed to really enjoying like the main character from that game. They built their own little universe. So I'm very excited to see the third one coming out.
Yeah, me too.
EA also said, and this one's not entirely a surprise, but they are actively working on a new Battlefield game. Battlefield seems to come out every few years. At one point, we got a Battlefield almost every year, but thankfully they seem to have taken a break and are looking to launch a much larger one. Not a whole lot said about Battlefield. I think they don't want to talk about the setting. They don't want to talk too much about it yet. I bet you we'll get a reveal trailer early next year is my assumption, because usually those games come out around the fall. So
right.
And then finally, they also confirm that the Skate reboot, the reboot that people who have played Skate have wanted for over a decade now, will finally be arriving in early 2025 via early access. So it will come out and will then develop longer and longer to make the perfect version of Skate. I've played Skate before. I was more of Tony Hawk Pro Skater guy myself.
Me as well.
If I have to be honest, but I think Skate is incredible, and I have friends who live and die by that game and still play it, Skate 3. So very excited for them to finally get a new Skate game.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Some other news. There's been a couple pieces of Nintendo news. We'll start with the good one. Good one. It depends if you're Nintendo or if it's us. Yeah. It seems images of the new Nintendo Switch, the Nintendo Switch 2, which I believe is a confirmed name now, have leaked online. Pictures of it came out on Reddit, but have not been confirmed by Nintendo as being legitimate. So do take some of this as a grain of salt. It may be right. It also may be rumor. But from this picture, it would seem, and this is what we were able to extrapolate from the picture, it will feature an 8-inch screen. This is a full OLED screen. It will feature magnetic Joy-Cons, so they don't slot anymore. That's very interesting. Yeah. Which means also they'll make new series of the Joy-Cons, I would think. It will feature USB-C ports on both the top and the bottom, which is a great addition because the bottom one made it very difficult. It was the top. Either way, whatever it was, it made it very difficult to use sometimes. Yeah. On top of that, it would seem the Switch to include 12 gigs of RAM. That's compared to the 4 gigs. That's 3 times the amount.
Huge jump.
Support HDMI 2.1. This is something we were both talking about this. This would mean capabilities for HDR, and we looked into it. It looks like it will run at 1080p in hand, and docked may feed a full 4K, which is crazy.
Would be incredible. That would be such a huge jump for the Switch 2. Because again, the second we saw this HDMI 2.1, again, that's potentially HDR and that's potentially 4K, which would be, that's what a lot of us were hoping for. But to see that this is getting closer and closer to being a reality is awesome. Awesome.
And then the final thing that we were able to get out of that, it would seem that the internal storage, which previously on a Switch was 32 gigs, is now 256 gigabytes, which is good. But also, we can't tell you what a game on the Switch 2 is going to be. And so while it seems like a promising thing, it could be like a PlayStation 5 game where every game is 110 gigs and you can only install 2.
Like no question with the Switch 2, the games will be larger, but like you said, Uno, how much larger?
Exactly.
That's the real question.
If it's anything like the previous Switch, we will be able to put our own third-party memory units in there and expand upon that. And so that shouldn't be an issue. None of this is 100% confirmed, but it does make us pretty excited. One thing that is confirmed, and this came from Nintendo proper, the console will launch before April of next year. So
that's so close.
That's a 6-7 month window. It's pretty unreal. We're probably going to get a big trailer drop now, especially I think the PS5 Slim just got announced, or Pro.
PS5 Pro.
Excuse me.
Yep.
And that comes out in November. I wouldn't be surprised if following that, the Switch makes its unveil for early in the year next year, after the fall going into winter window of video game comes out. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear about it very soon.
Yeah, I'm genuinely curious, and I know we've kind of touched on this before, but I'm curious if they would release the Switch 2 before the holiday season, or if they would do one last ditch, like, hey, buy the original Switch with Mario Kart in the holiday season, and then they do it early 2025. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what they're going to go for. It would seem crazy to release it this winter without having talked about it yet, but also they could just tomorrow say it's coming out early December, and that's plenty of time. I think people will line up for it regardless. So very excited to see, and especially excited to see what that launch title will be with it.
Yes.
I'm hoping it's a Mario game. That seems like a definite, but also praying for a Donkey Kong game.
Please.
And
Please.
And where's Metroid Prime 4? I bet you that's probably a launch Switch game.
Right. You would think. But yes, we are long overdue for another Donkey Kong game for sure.
Yes, big time.
For sure.
On to some other Nintendo news. This one, a little conflicting. Nintendo and Pokemon have now filed a suit. Is that how you say that? File a suit? A lawsuit. There you go. They filed a lawsuit against Pocket Pair, the makers of Palworld. If you remember, this Palworld was the one that a lot of times you would see advertised as Pokemon with guns, because quite literally they had Pokemon-esque animals who could shoot weaponry. Now Pokemon and Nintendo have filed a patent infringement lawsuit against Pocket Pair, and in that, what they essentially claim is that they had a parent patent by Nintendo and Pokemon for Pokemon that includes the Pokeball, and how in Palworld, while they're not going for the creatures or the look of it being Pokemon, or even the advertised being Pokemon with guns, what they're going for is the action of throwing the ball to capture a creature is something too close to Pokemon. So this was filed this summer, right after the launch of Palworld. It now goes through the judicial system, which will take forever. But the people at Pocket Pair have gone on publicly and said that they are unaware of the specific patents that they're accused of infringing upon, and they've not been notified of such details. So this was just done without any of their team being notified directly from Nintendo. And on top of that, they have also said they will fight this in court, if not just for them, but for all independent video games that want to, while yes, Pokemon is an entity, I think it's very hard to just say every game that is similar to Pokemon can't be made. That would mean Metroid games couldn't be made. That would mean Donkey Kong-esque video games couldn't be made. And so this will be fought in court, and will probably be a lengthy one, because nothing in court ever gets solved quickly. I don't know what your opinion on this one is. I kind of side on the Palworld side, because while yes, I understand Pokemon has Pokeballs, and there could be some confusion there, I don't think anyone sees Palworld and says it's a Pokemon entity as much as they use Pokemon as an easy descriptor, the same way that we would use Dark Souls as an easy descriptor for a third-party action RPG. So I'm kind of leaning on the side of Pocket Pair. But what's your opinion on this, Chugs?
I am too, but it is it's such a fine line, right? Like I wish as well. First of all, I unfortunately have not played Palworld yet, so I don't truly know how similar it is to Pokemon. But I think you're right. I think generally speaking, gaming, or a genre of gaming, inspires creativity for all these different indie companies and all these different developers, where they want to try and experiment with new things. And I think the idea of them having a stranglehold on this exact genre, I think that is a bummer. I think other people should be able to experiment and make their version of that game, because Pokemon is Pokemon. We've talked about this before. It is not going anywhere. It's one of the most dominant franchises of all time. Now, again, I wish I'd actually played the game to see if I could understand exactly where Nintendo is coming from. But I'm with you. Generally speaking, I feel like devs and indie companies should be able to make the game that they want to make. Obviously, it can't be identical. You can't have the same names of the characters and all that stuff. But again, Pokemon is a very inspiring genre of video game. I'm sure for a lot of people, it was part of the reason they got into game development in the first place. It's huge. But the only thing that makes me nervous, Uno, is I'm pretty sure that Nintendo has never lost a lawsuit that they initiated. So I don't know how this is going to go.
A little bit about Nintendo. They're very protective of their patents and of their IPs.
Very protective.
If you make a fan game, guess what? That's not ever seen the light of day. If you're making a translation pack for an older video game they've never released, they'll go after you. And it is true. They've never lost one of these battles. And a little known fact about Nintendo, they have enough money in the bank to essentially fail for the next 30 years, and it will not even make a dent in the money that they have in the bank because they have accumulated so much wealth from years and years of being at the top of their game. So I don't like the chances of Palworld in this situation, but I do still side by them because at some point there is a fine line where, yes, Pokemon is Pokemon, but does that mean any game where you grab creatures is off? It cannot be made. Like that's essentially telling you we own a whole genre of video games, which I feel like this might be the line where they might lose. They might lose, but also simultaneously they have enough money to not. So
exactly, it'll be interesting too because again, like you had mentioned about how protective Nintendo is. This has gone as far back as the original NES or the original Famicom. Like, as in the Atari 2600 era, anyone could make a game for that console. Yeah. It didn't matter who it was, if you had any affiliation with Atari whatsoever. And that was part of the reason for the video game crash, where the people were getting and playing all these games. They're like, I can't believe I spent money for this. Yeah. This is terrible. So Nintendo was actually very smart in what they did years ago with being like, okay, you need that Nintendo seal of approval, and you need to go through us to make sure that your game can be played on our console. But it's, again, they have been incredibly, incredibly protective from the very beginning. So I don't know, but again, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's an evolving crisis for sure. We'll find out more about it in the future, and I'm sure we'll still be talking about it probably next year and the year after because this will be a lengthy process. I would anticipate, unless someone takes a knee early on to because this will be costly for the people who made Palworld.
Yes.
For as much money, they're still an independent developer, and how do you go against Nintendo, who has essentially endless money in this situation?
Right.
We'll see.
Yeah.
And then our last piece of the news for this week is one that is surprising because I thought these games did well, but Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Final Fantasy XVI sales did not meet expectations based on what Square Enix has publicly said. So as part of a new published results briefing that was originally held in May, the company says that the video games FF7 Rebirth and 16, while profitable, did not meet the expectations they had made for both of these games in advance. Same with Foam Stars, although that game not entirely surprised. That did not make a ton of money. And Rebirth landing in Q4. Initial sales were not as strong as they expected. All three of their games, FF16, Foam Stars, FF7 Rebirth, underperformed when initially on PS5, and they argue that even when released on later consoles, will probably not meet expectations either. Final Fantasy 16 just recently released on PC.
Which is great.
Is great, and so we're assuming FF7 Rebirth will eventually drop on PS5. There's probably a 1 year or maybe 2 year exclusivity window. But to give you an idea, the first FF7 remake, the first part of the trilogy, has now been released on PC. So it's reasonable to expect that the next one will come out as well. But it would seem, because of in the same briefing where they talked about this, and this is the part that I'm not super excited for, is that because of this, Square Enix has claimed that it will now shift to a multiplayer focus and multiplayer platform focused strategy instead of having an exclusivity to just one console. I don't know if it's maybe it is. If it had come out on Xbox, maybe more people would have purchased it. But I also feel like there is a much larger user base now on PlayStation and on PS5 and on Sony than there is on Xbox. But if they were to simultaneously launch the game on PC, then maybe their expectations would have been met for sure.
Right.
I'm kind of surprised. I will be. I'm a little surprised they didn't meet expectations because, as far as like everyone loves these games, I'm just surprised they didn't sell to the amount that they thought they would.
I know. I was incredibly surprised. Well, first of all, is in regards to Final Fantasy 16. I know that game was really critically acclaimed, but I stand by it. That game is so incredibly underrated. It's one of the best Final Fantasies of all time, in my opinion. It's so incredible. So I wish more people had the chance to play this, and I'm glad that it's going to be released on PC. And in regards to FF7 Rebirth, I mean, it is interesting how large of a player base is still on PlayStation 4. And we're like just now finally jumping over to these exclusive PS5 games. Again, to me, FF7 Rebirth took FF7 Remake times 10. They just poured their entire heart and soul into this game. Immediately, my brain goes, oh no, are they going to have as many resources for the third entry in the trilogy? But I think they will. I mean, you can tell that they poured just everything into the FF7 remake project. So I do think Square going the route of being on multi-platforms, I think it is a good call. And I do think if it's released simultaneously on PC or simultaneously on Xbox, will that happen with the exclusivity rights and being like on PlayStation for a year first? I don't really know. But the more chances people have to play your game, the more people I think are going to play it. So I hope this doesn't affect Part 3 at all, because FF7 Rebirth is one of the greatest video games I've ever played. And FF7 Remake, that whole project is one of the most important things in video games to me and to so many people.
I know, like, part of it too, like Rebirth compared to Remake, a lot of the assets are reflipped, right? So a lot of the investment they make in the first game, they're capable of reusing those assets to create, and also the engine to create the second game. So I don't think the third game will be in peril. It definitely will still come out. I don't foresee them ever canceling the third game. On top of that, while it's presumed that it would cost a lot of money to make that third game, I still think it would cost less than probably the first one was, because they're capable of reusing some of those assets too.
Great point.
Yeah.
Great
so
point.
I'm hoping that game is unaffected, because I do want to see the conclusion to their story, and also like the late game stuff when you go completely open world and you have Ragnarok and you get to fly around and stuff. Like, I'm very curious to see how they address that for sure.
And then eventually, when they release all three in the Ultimate Collector's Edition box, that will go down to me as the greatest video game of all time.
Oh yeah, you get a Buster Sword with it for sure. Yeah, full blown. So very curious to see what Square does next. I hope they solve their issue and they go multi-platform on the next one.
Yes.
I think also in the climate now, while I understand exclusivity for one console, it does definitely cannibalize your audience. I don't think for example, when God of War comes out on PC a year and a half later, yeah, it's exciting for sure, but I feel like the sales on PC would be insanely larger if it just came out simultaneously, because then they have one marketing window to advertise it rather than two different marketing windows. And then they can, spend more time advertising the DLC or advertising their next projects and so on.
Absolutely.
So very curious to see what the future will be. But that is it for the week. In news this week, we're on to our favorite segment. That's the community mailbag segment right after this. And welcome back. It's time for Arcade Mailbag. That's right, the community mailbag segment here on All Elite Arcade. Go to tbs.com/arcade mailbag. You can get your questions read by us, by Evil Uno and the Chugs, in our favorite segment. We say it every single time, but we truly, truly do enjoy answering these questions. It is fun to go back in our brains. It is fun to reminisce on some old stuff. And a lot of you are very smart with your questions, stuff that we would never think about. So we're very excited. And it starts today with Tom C. Here we go. Yo, Chugs and Uno, your recent experience with Astro Bot and its haptic feedback has got me thinking. What game mechanics or features do you think are currently underused but have the potential to become game changers in the future? Great question.
That's a really good question, Tom. It is interesting as all these things are developing and changing within video games, with obviously a whole genre being like VR, or exactly what you had mentioned, Tom, with the haptic feedback and how much that really brings you into this game and brings you into the world. I know this has slightly been experimented with, and I don't really know how this would go. But the idea, obviously, of seeing what you see on the screen, feeling what you feel in your hands, I think if they added smells, that would be wild. Like walking through like a grassy field and you could smell the grass. Again, I don't know how you would do that. I don't even know if it would do well. But to get your vision and you're feeling it and you smell it, oh my God, I think that would be really, really cool.
I think that'd be a game changer for sure. I know, and we talked a little bit about this, but maybe someone out there can confirm this. But I'm pretty sure there was a third-party unit that would attach to the PlayStation 5 that expanded upon lighting behind your television. So, for example, if you're my example that I remember seeing was Doom 2016 and the Doom Eternal. But like, if you were in a hell setting, and obviously everything is majorly red, it would project red behind your screen and essentially extend your experience. So, like, if you had a shot, you would feel the reverberations into the lighting in the back. But I also think that same device, and maybe I'm wrong, but I remember thinking that it would also program smells based on what they could contextualize on your screen. So, for example, grass, gunfire, so it would smell like gunpowder, smoke, and there was a couple other ones. So I think it's something, while it seems futuristic and crazy, I think it can be done.
I think it can be done too. It obviously is not taken off or anything like that, but I think you're right. I definitely remember reading or seeing something that most certainly involved smells. So I'd be curious about that.
And I've seen movies like at the movie theater that have that experience where you're in those seats and they'll, like, if there's water, they'll spray water at your face, but then they'll have there'll be a smell to it, you know? I remember I saw the Aquaman 2 movie in this like crazy 3D 4D theater, and like you could smell lavender and you could smell like the ocean, and I was like, okay, like this really gets me into it. And in a video game situation, and maybe even more so in VR than anything, like that will definitely help me dive even deeper and kind of forget everything around me. I think that's a great idea, Chugs, and I hope that's what they expand upon for sure.
Yeah.
Great question, Tom C. I really appreciate it.
Yes. And up next, Grim Preacher. Thank you very much for the question. Hey, dudes, love the podcast. Thank you. I look forward to listening every Monday on my drive home from work. My question is, how do you think game developers balance innovation with fan expectations in long-running franchises? For example, with all these remakes coming out, is that the best direction to keep things fresh without alienating the fan bases? Awesome question.
So I'm when it comes to long-running franchises, my examples are like Mario, Zelda, even Gears of War. As long as you have the titular characters and you're making your own story, I think you can expand upon it and it's no issue. You can make a completely different type of game and continue on forward, and it's just fine. But that's not every franchise. Like, for example, to bring back to our previous conversation, if Rebirth and Remake, the third one, isn't the same type of game, and for example would suddenly be a full turn-based RPG, I feel like that would take away the experience. You know, there are some things that I feel are hard set, and so when you're talking about remakes, when you're doing RE2, for example, I think it is just and it is right and it's the right thing to take away the tank controls, because that's what's stopping people from playing it nowadays. And you barely touch the story and the environments, you just expand upon it. But I also like the option to go back and play those controls. So like a lot of the remakes will let you play the original soundtrack, or let you play with the original controls, or add this like a DRS screen to make it look like an older property. So I think there's ways of doing it. The only thing that I think you can't do is essentially make a new some properties, like Donkey Kong, for example. I want the next Donkey Kong to be a 2D platformer.
Right.
That's how those games should be. If you told me the next Donkey Kong game is a tactics game, that's super fun, but that's not what I want. You know, like there are certain games that are so ingrained in the mechanics of it, and there are other games like a Mario or a Zelda where you can play around because the story is not a continuous story. There's just multiple stories, and you can play around with it. So, short answer is that I think you can do anything with video games, as long as you keep the entity and soul of a video game. And if that entity and soul of the game is ingrained in the genre of game, you just don't mess with that genre.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, Uno. And specifically going off the remakes, I just want to say I feel like with Capcom, with RE2 remake, and with Square, with the Final Fantasy VII remake project, they have done it not only perfectly, but better than I could have ever imagined.
Yes.
Because I was a fan when I heard about RE2 remake. I was like, I really hope it's tank controls. I really, really hope it's tank controls. I hope it's the exact same style. And it wasn't. And not only was it not, but it was better in every conceivable way. And I think, too, what's really important is creating these new innovative concepts within the game, or making it more approachable for a gamer in 2024, while at the same time constantly giving a nod to the people who have played your original game. Like RE2 Remake is definitely different from the original Resident Evil 2. They added new surprises and new things within that game, but at the same time, it feels like Resident Evil 2. So whether you're someone who played the original way back on the PlayStation 1, or this is your first time with RE2 Remake, you are equally getting an amazing experience. Like there were so many times when I was playing RE2 Remake where I'm like, oh my God, there's this thing, or there's that thing. And then it would be like, oh, whoa, this was not in the original. And I'd jump out of my seat. It was so good. So I like the route that they're really going with these remakes, where again, they're respecting their audience story-wise, generally game design-wise, while at the same time creating some new surprises. I think that's really cool, because again, I for the longest time thought I wanted a one-to-one recreation of the game that I fell in love with. And I've now been taught that that is not what I want. Mm-hmm. I want them to take their creative liberties and change certain things. But the core of these games are this, like Final Fantasy VII Remake is Final Fantasy VII.
Yes.
It's not the exact thing, but it is, and it feels like Final Fantasy VII. RE2 Remake, it's different from the original RE2. But again, it feels like Resident Evil 2. So again, I've said this before, but Uno, for our generation, it's just the best time.
Oh, yeah.
We're getting like all these amazing new IPs, and they're remaking our favorite childhood games even better. So again, to kind of answer the question, yes, I think you do have to pay attention to your core fan base or your OG fans. But really, they should just keep doing exactly what they're doing, because it's some of my favorite games I've played ever.
And the remake craze is insane, because I don't feel the same for movies. I feel like movies, like, don't touch it. What are you doing? Yeah. Don't remake these things. Those are things I feel so precious about. Whereas video games, every single time a new one comes out, I'm like, you know what? I'm glad they remade Shadow of the Colossus. I'm glad they made RE2. And I'm sure we're going to be glad Silent Hill 2 was remade as well. You know, because in a lot of ways, they keep the entity alive. They keep the soul of it alive. They just make it finer and easier and more approachable for someone in this current age. And even for us, too, like, it is still difficult to go back to play these games. While it is fun to do tank controls, you don't realize how important it is to make it easier for you to play until you do it. And so I'm very excited for more remakes. We live in the best times. We live in the best times. It's just, constantly we're getting a barrage of great video games.
What a time to be a gamer.
Seriously.
But Grim Preacher, thank you very, very much for the question.
Yes, thank you so much. This one is from Digital Pete. Hey, Uno and Chugs, been with you guys every episode. Excited to ask this because I know your love of the indie developers. What indie games do you feel have had the most impact on the gaming industry, and why? I have a few on this one. What do you think, Chugs?
Okay, so there's a couple right off the top of my head, and I think a big part of this was the documentary that came out.
Yes.
Indie Game the Movie.
It's available on Steam. Go watch it.
It is. It is a great documentary. But I do think two games, those games being Braid and Super Meat Boy, were incredibly influential. First of all, that was really the first time I ever even knew about indie games. Honest to God, it was from that documentary. And I think specifically with Braid, for example, I feel like with how deep of a story Braid was and how far you had to dig, I felt like more and more indie games after that did have like this incredible lore that you really had to dig for certain games. So I think that was really cool. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the puzzles were very innovative. Super Meat Boy, this super challenging platformer game, which was awesome, that inspired a bunch of stuff. So I think the success of those two games really did help pioneer everything. But I will stand by this, and it's one of my favorite games of all time. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I just didn't recognize it. But I feel like since Hollow Knight has come out, there have been more and more and more indie Metroidvanias, and I love it. Mm-hmm. Please keep them coming. So I think Hollow Knight was incredibly, incredibly inspirational to a lot of the Metroidvania games that we're seeing now. So yeah, I would say, to me, off the top of my head, I'm going Braid, Super Meat Boy, and Hollow Knight.
So I definitely think it's while it is not just one game, I think the early 2000s is what really blew up the independent game craze. Part of it is Meat Boy, part of it is Braid, and part of it is just Xbox 360 just had a push for independent video games. And the one that I remember kind of kicked off the craze is a 2004 game called Cave Story, which was made by one Japanese developer. And what essentially happened is this game came out and people were so astonished that it was so good that there was like attention made towards more independent properties, including Meat Boy, including Braid, and so on. So that's one of them for sure. And while I agree, I would actually put Meat Boy as the other more prominent one. I remember in the early 2000s, one thing that really blew up independent video games, and this will sound so crazy, is Soulja Boy, who was a huge musician at the time. He only had one big hit, but at the time there were videos of him online talking about playing Super Meat Boy, and it kind of got brought into like the internet zeitgeist to a point that people were like, what is this game? And it grew from there, and that's how you got Fez, and that's how you got other video games, Binding of Isaac, and so on and so forth. While I do agree with Hollow Knight, I think Hollow Knight essentially made sure that Metroidvanias would never end. The game that I think is also instrumental is Undertale.
Oh my God, of course, Undertale.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I can't believe, of course, Undertale.
That's another game made by one developer that was getting 10 across the boards, and like what I think that game did for a lot of other developers is it showed that one person can make a video game. Like Animal Well, for example, made by one man. And upon that, too, is that you could take something that at face value seems like something, and the depth of it could be insane, right? If you haven't played Undertale, here's a slight spoiler, but like it plays on the mechanics of turn-based RPGs in a way that had never been done before, and so what you anticipate is what you're doing is not actually what you're doing, and then it turns you completely upside down, and then on top of that, being one person, making the music, doing the art style and so on, it's such a uniform experience that I feel like it empowered a lot of developers to want to make their own game, and I think that is one of the most important ones for sure.
I could not agree more on Undertale. And again, Toby Fox, he did everything, which is absolutely why. And like you said, Uno, the depth to that game, just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
So those are the ones that we chose. Thank you so much, Digital Pete. Great question. Appreciate that.
And last but not least, we have Jules H. What's up, Uno and Chugs? In your opinion, what makes a game truly timeless, and which games from the last decade do you believe will still be played 20 years from now?
Well,
great question.
So my first one is I think Undertale will live on 20 more years. I think art style wise, especially on the independent circuit, the art pieces that they create will live on and live on and live on, because I don't think there is a future where while PS5 graphics are incredible right now, 20 years from now, the only thing that we can get further on is just it's photorealistic, and we're already so close to it. So I think anything that's predominantly its own art style will live on from 20 years. And then on top of that, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this as well, but I think we're going to be playing Elden Ring in 20 years as well.
Yes. Oh, 100%. Yeah, because when I think about what exactly does make a timeless game, I think it's really interesting. I think there's a couple of factors that play into this. Is one, first and foremost, is it fun to play? Like, for example, this was not within the last decade, but I still play Super Mario World, and I think that game will be played for a very, very long time.
Yes, absolutely.
But within the other thing too, though, I think is a memorable, impactful story. Obviously, that's not always the case. But when I look at games like The Witcher 3, or I look at games like Red Dead Redemption 2, I truly, in my heart and in my soul, think that people are going to be playing these games for years and years to come. I honestly wish I could go back and forget my first experience playing the game. I loved it that much, The Witcher 3 and Red Dead 2. So again, super fun to play, really compelling stories, really amazing characters. And then like you had said, Uno, no question, Elden Ring will be played forever.
Yeah, I think so
no
too.
doubt.
Yeah, we're going to go back. Elden Ring will be one of those games that, much like Dark Souls 1, I think will always have a place in the history books. Elden Ring making it probably, and we're gonna see more of these open world 3D third person action games. But I feel like Elden Ring will have started a craze for the next 20 years, and we'll always be going back to talk about it. Great question, Jules H.
Yes,
and thank you very much. If you want your questions answered on our community mailbag, you can just go to tbs.com/arcade mailbag. That's tbs.com/arcade mailbag, and send your question in so that both Evil Uno and the Chugs can answer them right here on All Elite Arcade. Chugs, it's the end of the show. Where can we find you? What you doing on Twitch this week?
Yes, well, you can find me at twitch.tv/thechugs. I am once again continuing my journey through Black Myth Wukong. I feel like I got a ways to go. The bosses are getting harder and harder, but it's a blast. So please feel free to come over and hang out, twitch.tv/thechugs.
And I promised this last week, but I will do it in the coming week. I have so many games left on UFO 50. I'm going to go to twitch.tv/eviluno. We're going to unpack some of those. So do follow me on Twitch there, and follow Chugs as well, and follow our journey through video games that we will no doubt talk about right here on All Elite Arcade. That is it for this week. Make sure you go to youtube.com/AWGames if you want to see our video format, and also do check us out every noon on Monday for video format, but also for the audio format wherever you get our podcast. Hit that subscription or follow button, and you will be notified when we come back next. That's it for today. Have a nice day, and goodbye.